You know, in this line of work, and really just in life in general, we are conditioned to look for the catch.
Oh, absolutely. It's basically a survival mechanism at this point.
Right, because if a deal looks too good to be true, it usually is. But there is this one phrase in industrial contracting that somehow still manages to slip past the radar of even the most veteran project managers.
Let me guess. You're talking about free issues.
Free issue items, exactly.
Yeah.
It is such an innocent-sounding phrase. On the surface, it sounds like a massive relief. The client comes to you and says, hey, don't worry about procuring the heavy machinery. Don't worry about buying the raw materials. We have got it covered. It's on us.
Right. It sounds like a gift.
It sounds like margin protection.
It sounds like a holiday, frankly. But that is exactly where the trap snaps shut.
And that is exactly what we are getting into today. Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are tearing apart a specific document to find out why this happens. We are looking at template YB17 E2.13.
Which is titled Employer Requirement Free Issue Items.
Right. And the mission for this deep dive is pretty simple. We are going to prove to you why free might actually be the most expensive word in your entire contract.
It is a genuinely fascinating document because it completely flips the script on the standard procurement model.
Yeah.
Usually the contractor buys the materials, they mark them up, they take the risk, and they handle the logistics. Here, the employer buys the materials and just hands them over.
Hands them over for free.
For free. And yet somehow, as we're going to see today, the contractor often ends up with way more risk than if they had just bought the stuff themselves.
That is the part I really want to dig into, because we aren't just reading a list of items here. We are looking at a literal transfer of liability. So let's start with the basic definition. When this document says free issue, what is the actual legal mechanism at play here?
Well, Section 1 it's really deceptive in its simplicity. It defines these items as simply being provided by the employer to the contractor free of charge.
Right.
But the real weight of the document, the iron fist in the velvet glove, so to speak, is right there in the introduction. There is a phrase there that every single project manager needs to highlight in neon yellow.
I know the one.
The contractor shall incorporate the free issue items in the execution of the works.
Shall incorporate. That word shall is doing a lot of heavy lifting.
Oh, it is doing all of lifting. That is not a suggestion.
It's not a, hey, if you feel like it, use our pump.
No, it is a mandate. And think about the implications of that for a second. Let's use an analogy. If you are a professional chef and you buy your own ingredients, you know they are fresh. You know the source. You know the quality. You have total control.
Right. If I buy the steak, I know it is a good cut of meat.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But now imagine a customer walks into your kitchen with a grocery bag. They fill themselves at some random market and says, cook this.
Yeah, you lose control over the inputs immediately.
You do. But here is the real kicker. If the meal tastes bad,
You are still the cook.
you are still the cook. You still get the blame.
So by accepting free issue items, the contractor is essentially accepting responsibility for the performance of equipment they didn't choose, they didn't vet, and they didn't even buy.
Precisely. You are mandated to make it work. If that free compressor vibrates way too much, or if that free transformer has a slightly different voltage spec than what you designed your system for,
It is now your problem to integrate it.
it is your problem. You can't reject it just because you prefer a different brand or it's a little tricky to install. The contract requires you to use it. You basically have to marry that equipment.
That immediately changes the entire risk profile of the job. You aren't just building from scratch. You are integrating someone else's choices.
Right.
And if those choices are poor, you are the one paying your guys overtime to fix it.
Exactly.
Now, the document breaks this down into 4 specific categories, which I found really helpful. We have got materials, plant services, and startup items.
Right. And while they sound somewhat similar, the logistical headaches for each one are totally different.
Let's start with the big ones then. Materials and plant. This is sections 2 and 3 of the source text. Just so we are crystal clear on the terminology here, how does this document actually distinguish between the two?
It points back to the general conditions of contract for the strict legal definitions. But the drafting notes actually give us the practical answer. Plant refers to the heavy hitters.
Big
The
stuff.
massive stuff. We're talking process equipment, electrolyzers, compressors, transformers, the permanent infrastructure that makes the factory actually run.
I noticed it specifically mentioned PAS, DCS, and SCADA equipment in those notes too.
Which is absolutely critical to point out. That is the brain of the facility. If the employer is free issuing the control system, that means the contractor is responsible for wiring up a brain they didn't program.
Wow.
That is a massive interface risk right there.
No, this is where I got totally stuck and
Okay.
where I think the biggest gotcha in the whole document lies.
Hmm.
I was reading through the drafting notes in sections 2 and 3, and I saw these placeholders for Incoterms. And I know we usually gloss over shipping terms because it is the boring fine print, but here it seemed incredibly aggressive.
You cannot gloss over this. If you take absolutely nothing else away from this deep dive, take this. The Incoterm selection is the single biggest financial trap in the entire document.
Okay, let's unpack that.
The template forces the drafter to choose between two delivery methods, DDP or EXW.
Let's break those down. DDP is delivered duty paid. Now that seems pretty straightforward to me.
Correct. Under DDP, the supplier, which in this case is the employer handing over the free item, is responsible for getting the item all the way to the site.
Right.
They pay the shipping, they pay the insurance, they pay the import taxes. The contractor literally just has to be ready to unload it with a forklift. That is the good version of free issue.
That is the version where you actually get a free lunch. It just shows up at your door.
Exactly. But then there's the other option, EXW. X works.
X works. It sounds so harmless.
It is anything but harmless. The text explicitly defines EXW as meaning the contractor must provide the transport to the site.
Wait, walk me through the actual logistics of that. Let's paint a picture for everyone listening. The employer buys a massive turbine in, say, Germany, and they tell the contractor, hey, it is yours, free of charge, X works.
That means the item is sitting on a factory floor in Germany. Free just means you don't write a check for the turbine itself.
Right.
But you, the contractor, have to hire the crane to pick it up from that German factory. You have to hire the truck to get it to the port. You have to book the cargo ship. You have to pay for the marine insurance across the Atlantic.
And the customs, the border crossing when it arrives.
The text is very specific on this. It says, including export and import permits and duties.
That is huge. Import duties on industrial machinery can be massive. We are not talking about $50 here.
We are talking potentially tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars, depending on the country and the equipment classification. Plus the administrative nightmare of it all. Imagine you are a contractor based in the U.S. building a project in Brazil, and you suddenly have to clear customs for a German turbine. You might not even have the right import license to do that.
So the item is technically free, but the process of getting it to the site could just blow your entire logistics budget out of the water.
It could easily wipe out your entire profit margin on that specific item's installation. And remember, if it gets stuck in customs for a month because you filled out the paperwork wrong,
That delay is on you.
that delay is entirely on you.
It is incredible that a single acronym, EXW versus DDP, can swing the profitability of a project so wildly. It feels like the document is specifically designed to force a hard conversation about who actually owns the logistics.
That is exactly the point of the template. It prevents the assumption. You can't just assume free means delivered. You have to check the box. If you see EXW next to a free issue item, you need to pull out your calculator immediately.
There is another field in these sections that caught my eye. For every single item, Material 1, Plant 1, there is a required field for planned delivery date.
Which is the other side of the risk coin. If you are the contractor, your entire master schedule is built around these specific items arriving. You represent a highly choreographed sequence of events.
Right?
You can't install the piping until the pressure vessel is on site. You can't wire the building until the transformer arrives.
So if the employer provides the item, the employer effectively owns the schedule risk.
Theoretically, yes. If that date slips, the contractor should be entitled to an extension of time. But, and this is a massive, but that is only true if the date is explicitly written down in this document.
Ah, I see where this is going.
If you leave that field blank or you make it vague like Q3 2026 and the item shows up in late December, good luck claiming a delay, the employer can just say, well, we never promised a specific day.
So this document basically acts as a baseline. It is a line in the sand. You promised the transformer on June 1st. It is now June 2nd. The clock is ticking on your dime, not mine.
Exactly. It turns the free issue list into a hard schedule commitment. It forces the employer to actually be accountable for their own generosity.
Let's pivot to the second category, services. This is section 4, and honestly, this one surprised me quite a bit. I usually think of free issue as physical stuff, crates and boxes on pallets, but the document lists temporary utilities and security.
These are the invisible assets.
Mm.
And honestly, they're very often the source of way more arguments than the heavy equipment.
The drafting note lists power, water, and telecoms under Service 1. Now, why is it risky to accept free power? Isn't power just power?
Because power isn't a specification. If I tell you I'm giving you free power for your construction site, what does that actually mean? Is it a standard 120-volt residential plug? Is it 440-volt industrial three-phase?
Oh, right.
Is it available 24/7, or does the local grid cut out every afternoon at 3 p.m.?
Or knowing some of these remote sites, is the generator actually big enough to run 10 welders simultaneously?
Exactly. And more importantly, where is it?
Right, the location.
The document specifically asks for service location. If the connection point is 2 miles away from where you're actually working, you, the contractor, have to buy 2 miles of heavy-duty temporary cable.
Which is not cheap.
Suddenly, that free tower costs you 50 grand in copper wire and trenching.
I see. So the template is forcing the engineer to define the interface point. It's about drawing a map of where your hand shakes my hand.
Correct. And the start of service. You see, that field is required as well.
Because if the power isn't turned on until month 3 of the project, you are out there running rented diesel generators for the first 90 days.
Which you definitely didn't budget for because you were told the power was free. You see the pattern here. It is always about the gap between the vague promise and the hard reality of the actual site.
There is one specific service mentioned in the notes that I found really interesting, site security for OBL.
Ah, yes, OBL. Outside battery limits.
Right. Can you clarify that for us? What exactly is a battery limit in this context?
Sure. In large industrial projects, the battery limit is basically the imaginary line drawn around your specific construction zone. It is your sandbox. Inside that line, it is your kingdom and your total responsibility. Outside the line is the rest of the world.
So if the employer provides site security for OBL, they are guarding the perimeter of the larger industrial park.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They handle the main gate, they handle the public roads leading up to it. But this implies that inside the battery limit, security is entirely the contractor's problem.
It essentially solves the argument of who pays for the guard at the door.
It sounds minor, but imagine you have a massive spool of high-value copper wire stored on site, or expensive specialized tools. If something gets stolen, who is liable?
Right.
If the thief came through the main front gate, maybe it is the employer's fault for lax perimeter security. But if they hop the temporary fence into your specific zone, it's on you.
This line item in the contract settles that liability before the theft even happens.
It creates a firewall between responsibilities. That is what a good contract does. It anticipates the absolute worst day of the project, the day things get stolen or the day the power goes out, and decides who pays for it in advance.
Let's move to the final category, which might actually be the most time-sensitive of all of them. Startup items. Section 5.
The consumables.
The drafting note lists things like dim water and chemicals. Now, I get why a massive compressor is free issue because it is incredibly expensive. But why water? Why chemicals? Why wouldn't the contractor just handle buying that?
It is about scale and purity. Take dim water. Demineralized water. You absolutely need this to flush out boilers and pipelines before you turn them on for the first time. You cannot just use tap water. The minerals will completely destroy the turbine blades or corrode the pipes within weeks.
So we aren't just talking about picking up a few bottles from the local grocery store.
No, we are talking about thousands of cubic meters of this stuff. To get that much dim water, you either need a massive on-site water treatment plant, which might be what the contractor is currently building and it isn't actually finished yet, or you have to truck it all in.
And if the employer already has another operating plant right next door, they probably just have a tap for it.
Exactly. It is infinitely cheaper and easier for the employer to just provide it from their existing infrastructure. But here is the catch. Startup items come at the very end of the project. This is the final stretch, the finish line.
The ultimate critical path.
The ultimate critical path. Imagine this scenario. You have 500 union workers standing around. The plant is completely built. The piping is all pressure tested. The client is screaming for handover. But you literally cannot push the start button because you don't have the specific chemical catalyst to start the reaction.
And the contractor can't just run to the hardware store and buy industrial-grade catalyst.
No, it is often highly proprietary. Or it has a 6-month lead time from a specialty manufacturer. So if the employer drops the ball on the planned delivery date for these specific startup items, the entire project completely freezes.
And the contractor is just burning cash every single day. They sit there waiting.
Precisely.
Yeah.
The standing time costs for a full construction crew are astronomical. That's exactly why Section 5 requires such intense detail. Supplier details, quantity, delivery date. You need to know exactly whose phone number to ring when you are ready to flush those pipes.
It feels like the stakes get higher and higher the further down the document you go. Materials are early on so you have time to react, but startup items hold the entire project hostage at the very end.
That is a brilliant way to put it.
Now I want to zoom out for a second. We have looked at the 4 categories, but there is a meta instruction in this document that appears in every single section. It is in brackets, usually right there in the drafting notes.
The delete instruction.
Yes. It says if there are no free issue items supplied, then state none and delete the paragraph sections.
The default to none principle. This is so crucial for legal clarity.
But why? Why not just leave the page blank if there is nothing to give? Isn't a blank piece of paper obvious enough?
You would think so, right? But in contract law, silence is deeply ambiguous. If you just leave the services section blank, a contractor might argue in court 2 years later, well, in the last project we did together, you provided the water, so I assumed you were providing it here too. Or they might say, well, it wasn't explicitly excluded.
I assumed. The 2 most dangerous words in construction.
Exactly. Ambiguity leads straight to arbitration. By forcing the contract writer to literally type the word none in all caps, you are completely removing all doubt. You are making a definitive affirmative statement. I am giving you absolutely nothing.
It forces the employer to double-check their own generosity. They have to actively sit down and decide to give nothing.
And it protects the contractor, too. If the document says none, you have to budget for every single drop of water and foot of wire. There are 0 surprises. It forces the harsh reality of the budget into the open before anyone signs anything.
You know, looking at E2.13 as a whole, it is distinctly structured as a template. It has placeholders for project name, contract number, country.
It's a living document.
Yeah.
And that country placeholder is particularly vital. We talked about Incoterms earlier. Importing a free transformer into the European Union is a paperwork headache, sure. But importing that exact same transformer into, say, a highly remote region of Brazil or a very strict customs regime in Asia, that is a waking nightmare.
Because the entire definition of duty paid changes completely depending on local tax law.
It does. And the time it takes to actually clear the port changes drastically. In some countries, it takes 3 days. In others, it takes 3 months of stamps and bribes. That is why you simply cannot just copy-paste this document from one project to another. The foundational logic holds, but the actual liabilities shift entirely based on the geography.
So if we distill all of this down, this document, which is cheerfully titled Free Issue Items, isn't really about the items themselves at all, is it?
Yeah, not really. It is about boundaries.
It is about explicitly defining exactly where the employer's help stops and the contractor's massive risk begins.
Think of it this way. In any contract, money is very easy to track. We have a total price. We have monthly invoices. We have ledgers. But free issue items are like ghost assets. They have massive intrinsic value, but they do not show up anywhere on the payment schedule.
They are completely invisible until they go wrong.
Exactly. This document forces those ghosts to become solid. It gives them a strict date, a physical location, and a legally binding shipping method. It forces the invisible assumptions to become highly visible so they can actually be managed by the project team.
And it essentially assigns a throat to choke if they don't show up on time.
Very bluntly put, yes, it does.
It seems the biggest takeaway here for our listeners, whether you are the one writing these contracts or you are the one signing them, is to treat free issue with the exact same level of scrutiny as the final price tag.
Absolutely. I would argue it requires even more scrutiny than the price tag. Because if I pay for something, I control it. If I buy the pump, I decide when it arrives and what brand it is. If you give it to me for free, I am entirely reliant on you. Dependency is risk.
Dependency is risk. That is the bumper sticker for this deep dive right there.
I would definitely buy that sticker.
You know, before we wrap up, it just hits me. There is one lingering threat that this document doesn't explicitly resolve, but that everyone needs to mull over.
What's that?
Life cycle warranty.
Yeah.
We have talked all about delivery and integration and startup, but what happens 3 years after handover?
Oh, wow.
Right. The employer gave you a free SCADA system. You integrated it perfectly. But then a software bug in that free system causes a massive plant shutdown years later. Who owns that warranty claim?
That is a terrifying question.
Because a contractor integrated it, but the employer originally purchased it. The template handles getting the item to the site, but the long-term intellectual property and warranty tail of a free item, that is a whole other minefield to navigate.
It really is. You have to trace the original purchase order, which the contractor never even saw.
Exactly. Something to definitely keep you up at night next time you are offered a free system upgrade.
Without a doubt.
So next time you see a clause saying the client will gladly provide the materials, do not celebrate the cost saving, look for the Incoterms. Check the delivery dates and ask yourself, am I genuinely ready to be completely responsible for equipment I didn't even buy?
And if the answer is no, you better make absolutely sure that drafting note gets changed before you put your name on the line.
That is it for this deep dive into the hidden costs of a free lunch. Read the fine print, watch your delivery dates, and remember, nothing is truly free in construction. We will see you on the next one.
Stay safe out there.
If you're interested in the templates, please visit our shop. The link is in the description.
Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and see next time.